Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, or should I say Shang-Chi, is the latest in the MCU Phase 4, the newest movie. I did get to go see it today. It's directed by Destin Daniel Cretin and stars Simu Liu as Shang-Chi, along with Aquafina, Fala Chen, Florian Moontown, Benedict Wong, who we all love Benedict Wong, and Tony Leung. And I've been looking forward to this movie since the first trailer that came out because I grew up on kung fu films. I grew up on these types of films. I love kung fu, I love fantasy, but one thing I did not grow up on is the Shang-Chi comics. I really don't know much about this character at all. I was mostly a Spider-Man and X-Men kid and a little bit of Avengers and stuff like that, but this character, I don't know much about him, but I do know they changed his backstory for the film. The movie, following the events of Avengers Endgame, follows the story of Shang-Chi, or as he calls himself, Sean, living in California, and he gets attacked on a bus by the mysterious Ten Rings organization, the same one from Iron Man 1. And this leads him to return to his homeland of China, where he tries to find his sister and reunite his family. But things are never quite that simple because he is confronted once again with the Mandarin, a figure from his past, and the dreaded Ten Rings organization, the same one from Iron Man 1. A lot of people were really upset with what they did with the Mandarin in Iron Man 1, and so I think this movie, part of the reason as to why the Mandarin is the main villain is because they wanted to kind of make up for that, because that was one of the biggest complaints that hardcore Marvel fans had is, how could you do that to the Mandarin? How could you make him a joke? Well, in this movie, he's definitely not a joke, but he's not the same as he was in the comics. So if you're an absolute purist, you may not like the adventure that he goes on or the changes for that character. I personally did like what they did with the Mandarin here, very much so, but I can see some people who were very, very rock solid on their fandom, I guess you can say, not enjoying that portrayal. But I will say this, putting that aside, Tony Leung playing Wenwu, like he's great. I mean, he as an actor, he's fun. And actually, that's one thing that was a treat when it comes to this film. Everybody does a great job. Everyone's great. Aquafina as Katie is the most relatable sort of, she's the character we all relate to. She's the fish out of water. She's the one caught up in this big family drama. She's the one who witnesses Sean do these crazy things on the bus that she never ever thought he could do, and realizes that she's way in over her head. So it's kind of like if we were there in the story. Now, story-wise, I felt like the film was fine. I actually thought it was very heartwarming. I really enjoyed how, and I'm going to talk more about how they did this movie because I really enjoyed a lot of things about this movie. I really liked how this movie is structured, a lot of it very much like an old school kung fu film. It's not just the choreography, it's not just the awesome action sequences, which by the way, this movie has the absolute best choreography of any MCU movie when it comes to fight scenes. This one blows them all away. If you like martial arts action, I mean, you gotta understand, I grew up on kung fu films. So, and I don't just mean like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and the Bruce Lee movies. I saw these movies when I was a kid. We would rent them, even the ones from the East. But this movie does such a great job of paying tribute to those films, not just in the action, which is tremendous, but also in the story. This movie feels a lot like Shogun Assassin. We have a mysterious backstory. We have a mysterious youth warrior. We have a femme fatale. We have, the father-son type of relationship that you see from Shogun Assassin and from films like that. We have lots of wushu, tons and tons of wushu. Like, if you like wushu, you're going to get your wushu in this movie. It didn't even feel like an MCU movie until near the very end, because the movie does get very fantastical. There's lots of fantasy, so if you're expecting a straight up kung fu flick, that's not what this is. A lot of it is that. You're gonna, maybe 2/3 of the movie is just a lot of kung fu action, but there are things about this film that are total, like, over the top fantasy, and I think that some people are gonna think that this is too over the top. especially the final sequence. And if that's how you feel, I'm letting you know this now. Like, it's fine. Like, if you only like realistic movies and some kung fu, if you're into like cop movies and you really don't like the fantasy elements of the MCU, first of all, why are you going to go see this movie? But maybe you're thinking, okay, well, it's a kung fu movie. I like those kinds of movies. That's not what you're going to get here. You're going to get kung fu, but if you're expecting it not to go into the world of fantasy and creatures and things like that, this is not the movie for you. I should mention this is a non-spoiler review. I'm going to do my spoiler review tomorrow here on the channel, but today we're doing non-spoiler because not everybody's seen the movie, and I figured y'all want to get a non-spoiler review out, so y'all want to watch it. So here it is. I really liked what they did with the various characters. There are some things that I felt was a bit too much of a stretch, but at the end of the day, it's a fantasy film. It's an action MCU superhero movie. That's what it is, and that's what it is. I mean, we know what we're getting into, and I just, being a fan of these types of movies, really appreciated what they did as far as their references to events of the past, both in Endgame, Iron Man 3, and even Iron Man 1, as well as its teases for the future. Obviously, like with most MCU films, you have a mid-credit and post-credit scene that will set up events down the road, and the mid-credit scene for this film seems to be pointing in a direction that's a very, not unexpected. If you've been following the rumors since Phase 3, you kind of know some things that have been discussed here and there. I'm not going to go too much into it here. Speculation, I don't really give too much away, but you know that there's more. There's definitely more coming, and that shouldn't really surprise you. I think what really helped this movie is that the characters were all very likable and very relatable, even if you're not Asian whatsoever. I mean, you don't have to be at all to understand. They didn't really lean too much on the whole Asian American thing. I was kind of wondering if they were going to do a thing where they were going to show like racism towards Asian Americans, since that's been like a thing in the news for the past couple years. They didn't really do that. That's not what this movie's about. This movie is a family drama. It is a story about Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings and his tie-ins with that organization, and about his past. In fact, the movie's structured to where you have these flashbacks that take place during the film, going back to Shang-Chi at different ages. When he's a kid, when he's a teenager, all of that. And that kind of opens up the past, and as a viewer, you really don't know where they're going with it. And there's a couple of scenes that kind of get, like, you see bits and pieces of them, and later on you see the whole context, and you're like, oh, so that's what happened there. Like, they do things like that, like the Christopher Nolan style, playing with the audience and whatnot, which is good, because they actually worked here, and it helped really create this character arc for Shang-Chi, who, his motivations change as the movie goes on, but by the end of the movie, he realizes that he has to do what's right, and ultimately does become a hero. So it's an origin story. I mean, people have said it's the best MCU origin story. I don't know about that. I have to think about that one. I think Iron Man 1 is probably still the best one with that. But this one, as far as, I like Guardians 1 a lot too. I have to really think about it. But as far as it's in that category. I mean, it's definitely a very, very good movie. I don't know if I would put it, like I said, as far as origin stories go, right, for the MCU specifically, I still think Iron Man 1 and Guardians is probably better, even though I may end up changing my mind about Guardians, because I think this one I might like a little bit more than Guardians. I have to think about that, because Doctor Strange was also really, really good. This movie had a bit more heart than that one, though. And I love that movie, don't get me wrong. This one had a bit more heart. But I do wonder, again, I wonder how fans are going to feel about the way they did Mandarin here. Because I liked him. I really liked what they did. But I'm kind of bummed out we never got to see an Iron Man versus Mandarin fight. And I'm hoping that with the What If show, we'll get that. Anyways, my spoiler review is coming out tomorrow. So I'll meet y'all back here then. Thank you so much for checking out the review. And what did you think about the movie? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see y'all tomorrow for the spoiler review.